Hey, Steakin, can I get a oh yeah?
Oh yeah! What's up, y'all? I'm Steakin, this is my bro Stacy, and this is the Steakin Claims podcast.
A show where we talk about, laugh at, and educate each other on the weirdest things we know and do. We got guests, we got game, and we got good vibes. Happy International Women's Day to all you beautiful ladies out there.
Yes, to all of our intelligent, powerful, strong women in our lives. I think we could start this segment by shouting out a lot of the women who have influenced our lives and taught us how to be stronger and how to grow and everything else that we have accomplished in our lives.
As far as women that have been strong influences in my life, I would first of all like to point out your mother, Dorothy, Jordan's mother, Dorothy, and thank her for all the love and support she has provided for me and all the life advice and talks that we've had. And also to Ellen, who was mentioned in the family tree episode, for the same reasons. And then I would just like to throw a shout out to my sisters out there, especially
in the great beyond.
Especially, first of all, Caitlin, for having a baby so young when you were in school and still carrying on through school and finishing it out strong. And also to my other sister, Tanya, for being such a loving and supporting mother of a beautiful Down syndrome girl, and also Saphira, and just being so strong throughout it all and being the truly terrific mother that she needs. And then as well as Jenny, for always being there for me through thick and thin, supporting me through issues that I've had, and just being a great sister, always being there for me, and always giving me a place to stay whenever I need it. I also just want to give a shout out to all my non-biological sisters out there, and just let them know that they are awesome, and I love them for all the love and support they give me as well. I just want to give a shout out to my stepmother Cindy for taking me on and loving me as if I were her own kid, and also stemming back to that love and support that she is giving me through my teenage years and presently.
Solid.
I think that's it.
I love that. Yeah, so I'm gonna also shout out my mom, Dorothy and Ellen. I just want to really take a little bit of time to thank you guys, gals, for really being there and encouraging me and helping me grow and editing my papers when I get really confused and don't know what I'm writing anymore. And then gonna shout out my sister Jenna, because she is a tough cookie and we love her strength and her drive. And her just overall toughness and ability to beat me up a lot. And then my other non-biological sisters, shout out to y'all for helping me out, encouraging me. You get the vibe at this point. I want to give a real quick shout out to bonus mom of the year, stepmom of the year, mom of the year, Lisa. You've honestly kind of become like another mom to me, and I really appreciate everything that you do for me and my family, and I also really appreciate your food, and everybody who knows me knows that that's the number one way to my heart. So shout out to you for that one. And then I want to just take a quick moment to also shout out anybody and everybody who is a woman who I have worked with. All of you have taught me so much, and encouraged me to grow in ways that I didn't know I could. And you've supported me. A lot of you have supported me through some very difficult times in my life, and I appreciate that extensively, and probably more than you will ever know. And so yeah, we just want to like shout out all the ladies in our lives and know that you're incredibly strong and powerful, and you can do anything you set your minds to, and we love you for that, as well as for all the support that you give us.
I second that. Alright, Jordan, let's stem onto what makes this day so special.
Well, this day is important.
It is March 8th, by the way.
It is March 8th. It is International Women's Day, as we already know. It's a very important day because it really highlights women's suffrage and the movement towards equality that has gone on for women throughout history and now, because we still have a lot of issues in regards to gender equality, at least. You know, there's still a huge gender wage gap. There's still domestic violence, and domestic violence does work both ways, don't get me wrong on that one. There is still so many cases of sexual assault and sexual harassment, and you know, as much work as we have done, we still have a long way to go before we get to equality, essentially. And highlighting today is key in marking how far we have come, while still acknowledging how far we have to go.
Right, I would agree with that. I think we have come a long way since, say, the early 1900s, but I do also agree that we have a long way to go in that there's still, there's a lot of misogyny that still goes around. An example I want to bring up is my dad in particular, and he was born in 59, so he's definitely got some of the older views, and it was normal for them back then, and that's what they were used to. But my dad has grown a lot in the past few years, but he's still got that sense of like, he expects to have a hot meal ready for him when he gets home from my stepmom. He expects my stepmom to do the dishes, all that. He makes a lot of comments on that still, but he has definitely gotten better from what it was. And I think a lot of that is uneducation in the subject, and what he was used to back then is not how it should be now. We're all human. I think everyone should take actions as equals and different roles as equals.
Like with that so-called diversity across, you know, workforces in life, we get more women in the trades, we get more men in, like, I say, like, nurturing jobs, or like helping jobs is probably a better way to put that, in a sense of like nursing or social work, in child care centers, and, you know, we get more, like, we just kind of amplify that and make it more prevalent. We get more women within first responder organizations. You know, and then taking that further to inside the household, you know, everybody cooks and cleans, and I'm not saying everybody doesn't, like, has to necessarily do everything, like, but, you know, maybe I vacuum and you do laundry or whatever, right? Like, it's equal division of chores versus because one of us is the woman in this situation, we have to do everything in that sense, and then, you know, the man would go do the yard work, but not the gardening, but, like, they'd cut the grass or whatever.
Yeah.
I think that's something I think that you were kind of trying to get to.
Yes.
And as normalized as it is becoming, it's still very prevalent, especially in the media, I find. You see a lot of commercials with, you know, like, the cleaning products commercials. It features, like, a woman, or, like, they're the ones doing the cleaning, or they're the ones taking care of the kids, while, like, the man is out at work, or he's out doing some, like, big yard work and kind of vibe. And I think that's not necessarily where we need to target next, but it would be useful if we could kind of begin to address that issue of media perpetualization of gender roles.
Yeah.
You know, I think incorporating representation of this equality in the media is going to go a big, long way. I've seen a lot of, like, videos from, like, pre-K teachers and stuff being like, oh yeah, no, like, the gender roles that are, like, taught in the media are, like, exhibited in play, and, you know, like, even toy companies and the marketing that goes into them, I think, is kind of what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah. And I feel like that even stems back to our conversation about the media and their influence on the portrayal of the royal family and celebrities, in that the same context in kind of the portrayals they have over household roles and different things like that. They have so much influence over that, and if they can change their ways of portrayal, then I feel like that will definitely help.
Yeah, absolutely. I think tying it back into, like, our celebrity conversation, like, you know, you get somebody like Seth Rogen, I believe it was, who lost a crap load of weight, and then he was called sexy and all of this, and then had a woman had that similar transformation, you know, would she have been called sexy, or would she have been called anorexic, right? Like, there's that double standard of beauty even within the media that's unfortunate and needs to change, and I think we're beginning to advocate for that. But again, like I already mentioned, it's one of those big bottom-up situations that could really benefit from that top-down support. But I'm not sure if it's quite getting that yet.
So now, touching on more of the sexism kind of things, I know dress codes in school have been an issue where they might be encouraging professionalism, but they are blatantly sexist.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking as someone who identified as female in high school, the amount of times that I'd be wearing like a tank top or a nice sundress and told I had to go put a sweater on, or I'd get sent home because my shoulders were distracting, was absolutely absurd. I believe that the school board that we were in has changed their spaghetti straps rule as of late. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I do know they did make dress code changes relatively recently. With that being said, like, on some level, I can understand it in terms of you want to kind of encourage slightly more professional dress. But the fact of the matter is that I could have walked around in a cocaine and caviar shirt and been completely fine, but I wore a spaghetti strap tank top and I had to get sent home because I was violating dress code.
Right.
I'm gonna kind of anecdote at this moment. We had an English teacher at our school who was quite disgusting, to be honest, and everybody kind of knew about this. I know for a fact that it was reported on a few occasions, and I don't believe anything was done because he continued to teach there, and it got to the point where the females in the classroom would not go into the classroom alone with him because he was creepy. And we knew, like, if we had English and he was there that day, you weren't wearing a skirt in that classroom. Like, you were covering up as much as you could, and you were very aware of what you wore. And like graphic tees, you wouldn't wear them if they had writing on your chest, because he would ask. He'd be like, "Oh, what's your t-shirt say? Come closer so I can look at it." Or like he'd be like, "Oh, that's a nice skirt. Can you twirl for me?"
Yeah.
And it was just like very incredibly inappropriate, and
that just shouldn't happen in a school setting like that. And like
it shouldn't happen anywhere.
That borders on, well, no, yeah, not at all. That borders on like the whole abuse thing as well, and like sexual assault.
Exactly. Like it would be classified as sexual harassment had it happened in a workplace.
Or sexual harassment, I should say. And see, that's fucked up because that is his workplace.
Yeah. And like one anecdote that I actually can share very personally that happened is, it was like Halloween, I believe, and I was in grade 10, I think, and I had like agreed with my friends like the day before that we were all going to dress up or whatever, so I didn't really have time to kind of put together like any kind of costume. And so I had a monkey onesie at the time, and I was like, fuck it, I'm just gonna wear that because it's easy, it's convenient enough. So I threw it on before school and then went to school, whatever, and then I walked into his classroom and he was like, "Oh, like, what are you supposed to be?" And I was like, "Oh, like, I'm a monkey," like, and I put the hood up on it so that it like showed like the monkey ears or whatever. And he was like, "Oh, where's your tail?" He's like, "Turn around and I need to see if you have a tail." And I was like, no, I don't. No.
That's fucked up.
Yeah. And in the context and in the moment, I was like, I knew that it wasn't right and I wasn't comfortable with it, but I was like, also like, I don't know what to do with this information because how would it, like, if I was to report it, how would it come across? Right? Like, would he just be like, "Oh, like, I just inquired what they were," like, and I never said that kind of thing. And
see, that was the sneaky thing about him, is he would always do it in such a way that he had some sort of excuse for telling them to do what they did.
Yeah. And he was weirdly smart enough about it to do it when it was like, only a few students were in class or only a couple of students were paying attention.
Yeah.
And, as much as, we should have reported it at the time as it was happening, like, we're 14, 15, 16-year-old kids, and we grew up, like, with not a lot of experience in this. Like, it was a more rural area, so, like, not to say that this kind of thing doesn't happen in rural areas, but I feel like it was a little bit more sheltered in that sense. That we didn't quite know exactly how to report it or what to do about it, and
or how it would be taken even by
exactly,
the higher-ups.
Exactly. So
like, would they just excuse it, kind of thing?
Yeah, like where was that power imbalance kind of going to happen? And I know that we were talking about dress codes originally, but I feel like this is just also a really important issue that needs to be addressed. And the teacher in question does not teach at the high school anymore. He
does not live anymore.
Passed away. And when I found that information out, to say that I didn't feel a slight level of relief would honestly be a lie. Just given the way that I knew that I felt in his classroom, and I knew that other classmates felt in his classroom, the fact that he wasn't teaching anymore anywhere because he was dead was a little bit of a safe feeling. And knowing that, like, you know, these experiences were very common for a lot of the females that I went to school with and stuff, it felt relieving to know that, like, nobody else was going to have to kind of deal with that.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And not that I wish, like, his death on, like, I don't wish death on anyone. And, like, I hope that he is at peace, whatever happened. But I think on some level, like, more should have been done at the school with the amount of reports that, like, I knew of happening and things that I knew of. Because, like, it's not like we were, like, even if people weren't reporting it directly, everybody knew.
Yeah.
And so there's no way that, like, more faculty or staff didn't know. And I think, like, the school should have done more about it.
I agree.
So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on that situation. But I think I can circle back to, like, dress codes at this point, kind of delve into that a little bit deeper, because, like, it was, like, virtually impossible, like, especially in September, sometimes October, May, June, when the weather was nice. Like, it was impossible to have clothes.
Yeah.
To wear, like, you would either be, like, going to school in, like, weather appropriate clothing because it was, like, 30 degrees outside and you're in a non-air conditioned 3-story building with, like, 1,300 other sweaty frickin' teenagers, and, you know, you go in comfortable clothing and you risk getting dress coded and sent home anyway, or wear that sweater because you put a tank top on, or, you know, you wear your jeans because your shorts are all too short for, like, the dress code, and you, like, overheat all day because a lot of, like, women's clothing that was, like, in stock in particular when we were in high school was not dress code appropriate. And so, like, I don't directly speak from a lot of experience here. I did get dress coded quite a few times when I wore dresses to school, but in terms of, like, my personal experience with, like, the shorts aspect of things, I just went to the guys section and bought guy shorts because I had that look going and it kind of worked out. But, like, I know my friends would get dress coded all the time, and it's just like we can't buy any other clothing because none of the stores in our area are selling appropriate clothing. So what are we supposed to do? But no, it's difficult as somebody who identified as female to dress appropriately for school in the summer in particular.
Right. Yeah. So what is, I'm gonna let you answer this, being that I am a male and you did identify as a female.
Okay.
So what is your view on some of the history of women's suffrage, and what would you like to see happen in the future for women and women's rights?
Oh, what a beautiful question. So in terms of like the history, like you have a lot of like key names, and especially like, you know, different aspects of women's suffrage. So you have the fight for like the wartime vote, and then the fight for like the right to vote normally when we're not in a wartime. You have the Canadian side of things. You've got like a more global and international side of things. You've got local aspects. And for me, like, one of my biggest influences, historically at least, is Eleanor Roosevelt, FDR's wife. And she was a huge suffragette and activist, and would oftentimes go against, you know, the president's opinion or legislation that he had recently enacted. She would oftentimes challenge that and vote, and like publicly challenge it. And, you know, this was in like the 30s and the 40s, in a time when that was very much so frowned upon. And I find that absolutely iconic, A, and B, she was just such a strong woman, and I genuinely appreciate that from her. I also tend to focus like historically on a lot of past first ladies, primarily because that's where my main interest in terms of history lies, is with the presidents of the United States. And so I look at, you know, like Dolly Madison. So she was quoted to saying, so James Madison was president during the War of 1812, and then when the Brits were storming Washington, Dolly is quoted to has to have said like something along the lines of, if I could have placed a cannon in every single window of the White House, I would have done so, but the men who were supposed to be firing those cannons all ran off. And so she was just like very strong, and she would have stayed in Washington had everybody else not fled, which for a woman to have publicly like said that and challenged that at the time, like we're back in the early 1800s, it was absolutely insane. And I think that in itself is like a powerful move. And, you know, James Madison had taken off already. Like he was, I want to say, in West Virginia at this point, and she's still at the White House, and the Brits are 6 miles out from Washington, and she's just sitting there preparing her dinner and setting the table and all that. And then they're like, no, like, Dolly, like, you got a jet, like the British are coming. And she's like, okay, fine, but we're gonna like gather all of this stuff. And so, you know, that famous painting of George Washington that was cut from the frame, Dolly told people to save, because she was like, if you can't get the frame off the wall, then just cut the picture from it, and we're not going to let the Brits have it. So she's another, like, you know, in that time of crisis moment, you know, she kept her head and stayed really strong with that, and I think that's very inspirational. And then moving a little bit more presently, another two huge influences who are both kind of running the scene right now are Hillary Clinton and Michelle Obama. And say what you want about Hillary, she did nothing shady in the 2016 election, just so we're all aware. It's been proven by the FBI, thank you very much. And now for her to have like overcome that and overcome the Lewinsky scandal, which is another issue that I have, but that's a different episode. And, you know, with all of her work in, you know, not only as First Lady, but beforehand and afterwards, now with all of her work that she's doing and, you know, encouraging young women and being that icon of representation for them, I think that's absolutely fantastic for what she's doing. especially in the world of politics. And then Michelle Obama, like, oh, I love that woman. I think I might die if I ever get a chance to meet Michelle Obama. Like, straight up. And then I would never get to meet her because I'd be dead. But she is another huge influence for me currently, and she just does so much publicly. And like her podcast that was released, I believe it was over the summer, her conversations that she had with a lot of her friends and her family and everybody who was on her show just was so strangely inspirational. I'm not sure if that was like the intent of her podcast, but it really stuck with me and, you know, opened my eyes to like the world of representation and the world of racial inequality and the effects of the pandemic on BIPOC people in a way that I don't think I would have been able to do had I just been doing my own research. Like, she kind of gave me a starting point, and, you know, I loved her as First Lady. I think she did a lot of great work as First Lady, and she again got torn up by the media as First Lady. Like, that's perhaps one of like the worst things that I think could have happened to her. Not in a sense that like she couldn't handle it, because she handled it beautifully and gracefully and was absolutely amazing with that, but in a sense of it wasn't necessary. Like, the attacks on Michelle in the media were just like, you were just looking to make bad press, right? Like, the whole like Michelle Obama's arms meme, like, oh, what the fuck? It's kind of all I have for that. Just what the fuck. And so those are kind of big professional, I would say, women in my radar and inspirational aspects. And personally, there are other women in my life who have definitely like inspired me in ways that I don't think they even know. I think at this point I'm going to turn it into a little bit of a shout out once again. In terms of like small scale, but not small scale, but, you know, being, I say, present in your community. I really want to like shout out here my old supervisor, Jen. She really like taught me a lot and inspired me a lot in terms of like community outreach and being a presence for your clients on a very real world scale, right? Like, you know, as I spoke about Michelle Obama and Hillary Clinton and, you know, everybody else, they're all very large. Like, for me, they're larger than life figures, right? Like, they don't necessarily, I say, like, address issues that I myself can tackle, but that's not the right wording. They don't necessarily, they're like, if I got the power that I could have, if I gained that political power, that representation within the media that they have, I would, like, I aspire to be like them regularly, but like I would really want to use my voice for change in ways like they are. But then on a more like small scale, real world, I turn to Jen and her work within the community that she works in is just absolutely phenomenal, and she does absolutely amazing work within that community. And
what does she do? What is it that inspires you from her? What is it about her that has inspired you?
Yeah, so she works with youth, and she's there for her clients in ways that a lot of clinicians necessarily aren't. And not to shame other clinicians, it's just she's really passionate about her job, and she really puts a lot of effort into it for her clients and for no other reason other than her clients. You know, there are a lot of people who put a lot of effort into their jobs and are very passionate about their jobs who do it a little bit for the recognition, and that is not Jen.
Right.
And she does it in ways that are outside the box and is able to foster relationships that are just absolutely phenomenal. And I absolutely, I am always so amazed about the work that she does, and I'm eternally grateful that I got the opportunity to be a student under her. And yeah, so thank you very much, Jenna. I don't know if you're ever going to listen to this podcast, but just know that you do mean a lot to me. And then I think I'm going to shout out one more person here. Actually, it's kind of one more group of people. And this one, y'all, so it's Dee, Raquel, and Alana here. Y'all were very prevalent in my life when I was at Lakehead. And I think each of you took a different approach, but your general ideas kind of aligned in a way of teaching me very important skills, in a sense that I am in control of my own body and I am in control of my own reactions, and nobody can really change that but me. And I don't need to necessarily conform to other people's ways of doing things or dealing with situations, and engaging in behaviors that may not follow the norm of what my friends were doing or what other people I knew were doing, and that was okay. And then allowing me to kind of stay true to myself. Dee and Raquel in particular were big in when I decided to come out at school, and Alana was on mat leave, so she wasn't there, so
Right.
it's no fault of hers. She just decided to have a baby, whatever.
Poor timing to have a baby. Why
Yeah, I know, right? Everybody in my life just has poor timing on their babies. And just making sure that I was comfortable everywhere at the school and everything was going well with my coming out, and there were no issues regularly. And I remember one day I walked into Raquel's office and we just started chatting, and I brought up hockey, and I didn't come out to the hockey team publicly. There were a few people who knew, but I didn't come out publicly to them, just because of the culture of hockey in general and whatnot. I just wasn't 100% comfortable with that, and we got on that topic, Raquel and I was just yeah, no, it's fine. And she was are you sure? You can play on whatever team you want. You can do we can do whatever we need to do to make it comfortable for you. And I was okay, I wasn't expecting that kind of a reaction, that much support, just from an offhand comment that I had made.
Right.
And so in that aspect, the three of them in particular really, really helped me grow. And again, I don't know if they're ever going to listen to this podcast, but I hope they know that they all mean a lot to me. And they, honestly, I miss them every day. I'm not in Aurelia regularly anymore. I saw Raquel briefly in the summer, but I haven't seen no, I saw Raquel in November, I lied. But I haven't seen Dee or Alana since before I graduated. I miss all three of them so much. I hope that they know that they're doing great work, and I hope that they know that they are inspiring to me, and I would anticipate other people at the school. Even though I may not have said it enough or shown my appreciation enough, because I was a little bit of a shithead. They do mean a lot to me, and they do inspire me a lot. And yeah, That's kind of my inspirational woman in my life. I forget what your original question was.
Moving on to the last part of my question.
I completely forgot what your question was, and then just turned it into like a completely different topic.
My initial question was what was some of the
history.
Oh yeah,
we were talking about the history.
that went completely off track, but no, that was
okay.
good.
But they're all historical because nobody I really talk to and now, like they're all Lakehead people, and I don't go to Lakehead anymore. Okay, I'm innocent. I fit the question.
No, I enjoyed that. Moving on to the last
hope
part.
That makes it into the episode.
Moving on to the last part of my question now. What, in your opinion, personally, would you like to see in the future? We'll say near future because the big future has been talked about a lot for women's rights and women in general. But what would you like to see personally in the near future happen in terms of progression? Yeah.
Okay.
In terms of progression for women and women's rights.
I think one of the big things that's kind of achievable within my lifetime, I would like to see like a little bit more diversity, I think, particularly within my field of work, like within social work. I think it's very like field dependent.
Right. When you say that, do you mean like it seems like there's a lot of like women in social work?
Yeah, like the woman in social work aspect is huge, primarily, but I think also like within like subsections of social work, it's a little bit more, I say diversified, but I'm not too sure if that's 100% accurate. Like, so I look at like my cohort at Lakehead, there was 23 of us, and there were only 2 guys.
Right.
My cohort at UBCO has about 40 some odd people. I don't know the exact number because I've never met any of them in person. Online school guys. And I think there's only like 5 or 6 guys, like male people who identify as male.
Right.
Right. And so, you know, I look at that and I'm like, okay. But then I think like subfields, like I think like child protection has a lot more female staff than male staff.
Right.
Whereas like I think on some level like indigenous areas are a little bit more equal in a sense that maybe not necessarily as social workers, but they take on more of like a community approach, and so there are more males present in like the concepts of, you know, we're trying to like get our community help and like these people need help, so there's more males involved in like the planning and the development and the implementing of programs within indigenous communities.
Right.
And I think within like first responder communities, it's slightly more even. I still think it's a little bit more female heavy, just based on the people I know within the community, who actually work in the mental health aspect and not just the first responder aspect. But I think there are definitely like more males, and the work that I'm doing right now, like my supervisor is a male, and this is actually the first time in any of my placements that I've had a male supervisor or even just a male working with me
Right.
in the field and doing the same things that I'm doing. So yeah, like I would like to see the diversity kind of increase a little bit more, and then kind of by proxy to that, would love to see like the gender wage gap close.
Right.
Completely.
Yeah.
Because it's bullshit. Not gonna lie, it's bullshit. And I just straight up don't like it. Although I did read an article a year ago or so, and so I may be a little bit inaccurate here, but I did believe that it said that women with PhDs were making more than men with PhDs regularly. However, I think there might have been a catch in that, like, the fields that they were studying, there were more women with PhDs, and they just kind of did like a general overview.
Right.
Then there were more women with PhDs than there were men, and so that's how that number kind of totaled out. But I may be wrong there. I remember there was a limitation that was like, is that accurate information? But yeah, that's kind of the vibe there.
I will throw in an example here that I think there is starting to be some progress made. There's still a lot more to go, but there's some progress being made towards closing the gender wage gap.
Absolutely.
And my example for that is my sister Jenny and her husband Dustin. It is a little bit different because they work two completely different jobs. But it is kind of an example of a household where, so my sister Jenny works at Shopper's head office, and she makes way more money than Dustin makes. Dustin works as a salesman for Golf Town, selling. It's not technically Golf Town; it's like a subsidiary company that sells golf lessons. But yeah, so there is that. It's kind of an example where a household is actually. There are starting to become more and more households where the female actually makes more or equal to the male of the household. But yeah, there's still that gap that needs to close between men and women in equal positions, where the male still makes more than the woman.
Absolutely. And then, like, we need to get to a point where females are not being passed over as much for promotions or for raises or bonuses, whatever it may be, because that's still happening.
Right.
And it's very unfortunate, and I think there's a slight piece of it that it doesn't make it right, but that can be traced back to like a biological difference. And so I was speaking with a PhD student who was also a volunteer firefighter about a week or so ago now, and she was saying that when she was in like the volley service and her pager went off, it got so much harder because, for her compared to like the other guys, because she had kids at the time, and it was like, well, okay, so I have to figure out someone to like watch the kids, I have to like, just so I can go respond to this call, whereas with the guys, it was assumed that they could just go.
Yeah.
Right? And so, like, we had a whole conversation about like the reproductive elements involved with like pregnancy and childbirth, particularly within the fire service, just because that was the nature of our conversation. But like, that plays a factor into employment, right? Like, as a female, like, if you're looking to start a family, you kind of have to think like, okay, am I going to be okay at this job? Knowing that I'm going to have a kid in X amount of time, or I plan on having a kid in X amount of time. Does that give me enough time to like get settled in at the job and be allowed even like be okay and not risk losing my job if I take maternity leave, if I like have this child, right? Whereas a male, it's just kind of assumed that everything will be fine.
Right.
And I don't think that's right. And unfortunately that is the way it is, but I think we need to I think it's starting to change in a sense that paternal, like the stay-at-home dad, or taking time off as a dad when your child is born, or when you adopt that child, whatever it may be, or foster that child, it's becoming a little bit more apparent, but it's not commonplace yet, I think, is what I'm trying to get at.
Right.
And it's unfortunate.
In short, I feel like we still have a long way to go for women and women's rights.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of what this day has become, is recognition of women and what should change and how strong and powerful they are. And I do believe that women are and should be treated like equals.
Good, because we should. Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you there. I think as far as equality has come, I think we still have a lot more to go.
Yeah.
And I think we're starting to make that progress. More work obviously still needs to be done, and hopefully it will get done as time goes on. But I think we provided a good scope into, our influences and our thoughts on today and the women's rights movement in particular.
Yeah.
And yeah, hopefully we at least gave you an opportunity to open that door for a conversation about the issues that we talked about today.
Well, that concludes today's episode.
Thanks y'all so much for tuning in, giving us a listen. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow, etc., etc., etc. Comment, share, tell your friends.
And tune in next time when we post another podcast.
We can't give you a timeline on when that will be because we're both in school.
Bye.
Bye.